Enjoying the slightly cooler weather and even more cooler to come. So they say. So we
Yeah,
hope.
yeah.
I don't know about you. I was a little surprised when I got to the campus this morning because I expected a few more fences and a little harder to get up to FEB. I'm sure the construction is coming, but be patient and appreciate your flexibility as we deal with that, and especially on early on Thursday mornings. Thoughts and prayers for anyone who has friends or relatives in the Florida area. I know Jill's family is still there, so keep them in your thoughts because with the hurricane, it's not a fun time for them. Uh, I sent out the email this week. Hopefully everyone got it and had information about Zoom. We have someone who's usually here who's on Zoom this morning. So if you can't show up or if you're out of town, you can always join us on Zoom. And if you miss it completely, we have a YouTube channel. So you're welcome to watch any of the lessons on the YouTube channel as well. Today I'm wearing the Red Sox and I had lots of options, but I decided to honor Louis Tiant. I don't know if y'all saw that he passed away this week. Louis Tiant was a pitcher back in the 60s and the 70s. He pitched for some other teams as well. He was most famous for Boston, and if you grew up in the 70s like I did, you always tried to replicate his throwing motion where he turned his back completely to the plate. And the other reason why I'll always remember Louis Tiant is because my favorite player, as you might remember from last year when I wore his jersey, is Jeff Burrows, 1974 MVP. I could tell you more about his career, but he had 240 lifetime home runs. Well, I have one of them on tape, and it's off Louis Tiant. I want you to watch the curveball that Louis throws Jeff and how Jeff deposits it, boom, into the left field stands at Old Arlington Stadium. One of 240 round trippers he had. But anyway, thoughts and prayers for Louis Tiant because I know that Red Sox fans have missed seeing him. One other thing I want to tell you about is we'll call it the power of God. Last week I told you about our trip to the Field of Dreams. We left on Sunday morning. This was a week and a half ago. We left on Sunday morning, flew to Chicago, went to a Cubs game, got up Monday morning, drove to Iowa about 3.5 hours, got to the Field of Dreams, had a great time, drove back Tuesday morning, came back Tuesday night. Nice, quick trip. And as Kim and I are flying back, and our son Brandon went with us as well, but as Kim and I are flying back, we had a long talk about, can you imagine what the reason was that everything about this trip was perfect? Everything was perfect because so many things could have gone wrong. We get to the airport, things were fine. I mean, it's always busy at ABIA, but we get to the airport, things are fine. Our flight leaves on time. We get to Chicago, we rent a car, it's not a long line. We drive to Wrigley Field. We park near Wrigley Field at Brandon has a friend who lives real close to there. We park there, we walk, we get to a restaurant that has an opening. We sit down, we have just enough time to eat. We walk over to the stadium, we get in, and we get the last front row seats in the bleachers that are still there. We watch a good game. Okay, didn't get a home run ball or anything like that, so it wasn't that perfect. But you see what I'm saying? So many things could have gone wrong. That night we get together with Kim's aunt and uncle. Things were great. We stay with them. On Monday morning, we get up and Kim wants to see her cousin, who's about 10 years younger than her. And we go to see her, visit with her and her family, and her husband, or I guess her kids were at school, and then went to Iowa. Well, it could have messed things up, especially no offense to Kim if she's watching. I don't think she is. Her timing isn't always great, but we stayed just long enough where we get in the car to Iowa. We get to the Field of Dreams exactly at the time when our tour is supposed to start. We have a great tour. We have a great time at Iowa, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, everything was perfect. And we're talking about, isn't it great how sometimes God makes things perfect just for you? And how thankful we are for that. Again, we got home on Tuesday. On Thursday, after our Men in the Word meeting, Kim had a doctor's appointment and went to the doctor, and the doctor found something that she wasn't too happy about. And in the uh, looking for things, I guess you could say. So we had I guess you call it a pensive weekend as we're waiting on things. And Kim had an appointment Tuesday to go to another doctor to get an MRI and an ultrasound and various things. And as we're thinking about how perfect last week was and why did things change? What's going on? And it just makes you question things. But God is powerful and you have to trust him. And Kim went on Tuesday morning and got results are fine. It was just a scare. There's nothing wrong. So praise be to God. But just knowing that we have to trust him in everything we do. Sometimes things seem perfect. Some things times there may be a bump in the road, but trust him because at the end, all is good. Let's stand and sing. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Melt me, mold me, fill me, use me. Spirit of the living God, fall afresh on me. Pray with me. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for all that you do for each and every one of us. Thank you for these great men, and thank you for Gaines Bagby and what he's going to teach us today about leadership. We bless everything in your name. Amen. And with that, as I head back to unmute his mic, Gaines Bagby is going to come up, and First Timothy's study continues with some verses about leadership. Hang on a second, Gaines. It's all you.
Are we live? Thank you.
We're live.
And you took the clicker with you, I think.
Hey, John.
That will help. It won't help me, but it'll help everybody else. I'm feeling very other focused today. We should all feel that every day, right? Oh, there we go. So today we're going to be speaking about Christian leadership qualifications. And let me first preface this by saying these are aspirational, right? As we go through here, you're going to say, how could anybody be all that? And the right answer is probably not. But these are things that we should be aspiring to as we go through our lives and our and working in our churches and working with everyone in the community. So in 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7, let's just go through the word. The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to leadership, he desires a noble task. Therefore, a Christian leader must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, and a clicker that works. Let's see. Then we got the right button. That's good. Sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, able to teach, not a drunkard. The clicker. All right. Not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, as we heard on Sunday, not a lover of money. He must manage his household well, with all dignity, keeping his own children submissive. Good luck with that one. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may be puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by others or outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into the snare of the devil. All right. Before we get any farther, let me just say that when I say leader here, overseer, bishop, elder, old man, superintendent, magistrate are all synonymous to Paul. So you may see, I saw in some of the translations, overseer, which I don't really care for that word, but in the translations, in the way that that we look at these, all these are synonymous. presbyteros, and I'm going to go through some Greek terms. I know Harry knows all those, right? Yeah, all of them. But presbyteros is the person, and presbyteros, does that sound like anything that you've heard of? Yeah. And episkopos, that may sound familiar too, some of that. And that's the actual task that the leader is performing or working with other people to perform. Both presbyteros and episkopos have oversight over others and responsibility to a higher power. All right, so husband of one wife. Les and I went to Hawaii recently, and we found out that not only was it our 30th anniversary, but there was a beer company there, Kona Brewing, that was having its 30th. And there were a few other things having their 30th. I'm like, well, you know, okay. But we had a great time, a couple of weeks together. It was just magical, kind of like the Field of Dreams trip that Mike took with Kim. So at the time, 2,000 years ago, having just one wife, being the husband of one wife, preserving everything that marriage is and all its purity, was a radical concept. It was an absolutely radical concept. The Romans, the Greeks, even the Jews were polygamists. They thought nothing have 2, 3, 4, 7, 8 wives. Personally, I can't imagine that, but you know, that's a lot to deal with. But people of means often had multiple wives. So having one wife, this is a concept that I think some of us may have some trouble with. In some churches, has been hotly contested about what this really meant, and still goes on today. But what Paul meant was not whether you had ever been divorced, or your wife had been divorced, or maybe one of the spouses had died and somebody got remarried. He wasn't talking about that. He meant one wife at a time, not one wife for a lifetime. Let that sink in a little bit. Interestingly, divorces were easy to come by. If a man wanted to divorce his wife, all he had to do was write something out and she was out of there. I've heard that, and it's maybe repeating an urban legend, but the Jewish women often had lots of jewelry on their hands because they could be put out in an instant and then just have to leave the house with, you know, forever with just what they had on their back or on their fingers. So. All right. So next slide, prudent. The Greek word for prudent is sophron, and it doesn't translate really well precisely, but what it does mean is self-control, and especially having complete control over your sexual desires. Even Jimmy Carter admitted to having lust in his heart. So I'll leave it at that. What this is a man in whose heart Christ reigns supreme. So Christ above all else, everything, heaven and earth, Christ first. Next is well-behaved, kosmios, orderly and honest. That's why we have Honest Abe up here. His inner control issues outer beauty. Hospitable. I've got this up there because I like the picture. But when you think about hospitable, what do you think about? Philoxenos. I don't think about philoxenos, but that's the Greek word that means open heart, open home. A man who gladly and at all times welcomes into his house servants of God. Now, this was at a time when third-party accommodations or inns were dirty, they were expensive, and often downright immoral. Extended families, on the other hand, could welcome others in the family, even they're far away. But Paul was demonstrating here the family, or the ohana, the family of Christ, and saying that, you know, we should all be hospitable to other Christians. Listening to guests and their needs comes naturally to this man. Next, I love this word, able to teach, didaktikos. didacticos. It just kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Leader's duty was to preach to the unconverted and teach the converted. Most effective teaching was not by speaking like I'm doing today, but by being. By living in such a way that in him, that men could see a reflection of the master. Gentle, epiekes, and I don't know that I pronounced that well, but I hope you did. Not violent, disinclined to fight, reflecting the spirit of the law, not just the letter. So church officers are set apart or ordained publicly, not in secret. They're servants of the church and are answerable to both the congregation and to God. Their duties were to preside over the assembly and teach the congregation. Officers were not to be recent converts. If you think about it, it makes sense for two reasons: that the person not get an inflated sense of self-confidence or pride, and that he does not fall into the condemnation of the devil. So officers are to be good examples of how to live in the church and in the greater community. All right. The next few things I want to visit about there, I did not have slide for, so don't be looking for them. Ethos. That's a Greek word for character. So character embodies the guiding principles that define a community, a nation, or an ideology. It's the balance between caution and passion. So think for a second with me, can a person of poor character be a great leader? There are numerous people, in history that we can go back to that might have had poor character. I think immediately of Attila the Hun and Adolf Hitler. They were effective leaders up to a point, but their legacy was besmirched by their poor character. What's the difference? Another question, what's the difference between leaders and Christian leaders? Think about that for a second. In my mind, it boils down to one word, which is character. And character determines legacy. There are two things, two organizations I've been involved in that are focused on service. The JC Creed, the last line of the JC Creed, and we used to say this when I was in JCs, I think Tom Hutchison did this too. The last line of that, do you remember that, Tom? It says, service to humanity is the best work of life. And the Rotary motto is service above self. So thinking of others before yourself. At the end of the day, character means a person is driven by serving others above themselves. So the question is for you today. What is it that leaders do to get us to follow them? What would cause us to stop following a leader? What are the differences between a leader and a Christian leader? What does excellent character depend on? And can a person of poor character be a great leader? Let's go to our groups.